Hey guys, this is Malki Assad, and today I'm excited to have Dr. Leila Cattelan to talk about her experience matching into dermatology or competitive specialties in general in Canada. Welcome, Leila, to the channel.
Hi, my name is Leila. I'm a PGY1 in dermatology at McGill, and I'm super excited to be on the channel with you today.
I'm super excited too. So I want to start by asking you about the residency application in general. How does it work? You know, in the US, we have the ERAS, you apply to different programs, you get interview, and then you match. How does the system work in Canada?
So actually the system is quite similar. So instead of ERAS, we have something that's called CARMS. So it's Canadian Resident Matching Service or something like that. And basically how it works is very similarly, we have a certain number of programs across the country, and basically you make your applications to as many of them as you want. You submit all of your documents. Usually, so this year our timelines are a little bit messed up because of the pandemic. So everything's been pushed back later. But classically, we'll submit all of our documents by the end of November, and then we wait. We have our interviews in January throughout the whole month, and during this month, people will travel from school to school across the country, usually like from east to west or something like that, and do all their interviews. And then in February is kind of like the month where we wait, and then usually by the 1st of March, we hear where we matched. And I think similarly to ERAS, we have to rank kind of our top program to our least top program basically. And we have to make sure to rank programs that we will be willing to go to because it's a binding contract. So whatever we match to, you have to go. So that process can be a little bit challenging. And that's pretty much the process.
That's awesome. And I think, as you said, it's very similar to the ERA system, to the American system. And if I remember correctly, one of my friends who applied to both the American and the Canadian system, that you get your Canadian results earlier. So if you apply to both, and you match in Canada, you will withdraw yourself from the American match.
Exactly. So if you're planning to apply to both, you have to make sure that both the ERAS and the CARMS institutions are aware of that, because they'll have to automatically withdraw your candidature to the US one if you match the Canadian. And if you don't match the Canadian, then you'll always have the US match afterwards. And it's very important if you are doing both to make sure that both countries are aware, because if they aren't aware, that you can get in some trouble for that. So it's always important to be transparent.
Awesome. And since you mentioned the dermatology, I want to use this time to take your advice on how candidates and applicants can optimize their chances of matching into dermatology or any competitive specialties, because I believe the factors are pretty similar between specialties. And I want to start with medical school. As a medical student, what applicants can do in order to optimize their chances of matching into competitive specialties?
So I think overall, it's very similar. What I would say just before I get into it is that most schools in Canada are pass-fail, in the sense that our grades don't matter as much. Obviously, you have to pass all of your rotations and all of your exams to get through each year. But most of your kind of what you can do to be competitive in Canada is going to come from your elective performance. That's always very important. And then from kind of the other things that you do outside of medicine. So extracurriculars, research is always super important, presentations, and anything that you can do to stand out. So just to say that your grades, your numerical grades don't matter as much as I think they do in the US system. So I can kind of just give an overview of what I did each year of medical school, if that would be helpful. So I'm from Montreal, and I did a bachelor's degree before getting into med school, also at McGill. So during my first year, what I did, which it was kind of a unique opportunity that I had because of the way things happened, but usually I think most schools have interest groups for different specialties. So what I would recommend is joining that interest group as early as possible and getting positions within it. If you have the rare opportunity where the group is kind of dormant and you have to like restart the club and like kind of revamp it, that's a great thing to do. That's kind of what me and my friend did. We became co-presidents of this club that had been kind of dormant for 2 years, the dermatology interest group. And that was a great opportunity. But either way, just joining that interest group and kind of moving on up throughout the years is a great thing to do. Other than that, I really tried in my first 2 years of medical school to just do fun clubs of things that I like to do. So I used to do cheerleading in Stage Up and in like I used to dance when I was in high school. So I joined the McGill Medicine cheerleading team, and I became the coach in Med 2. I've always really liked being part of clubs where we plan events. So I did stuff like the Med One Talent Show Committee, where I planned and organized this event, got sponsorships, planned the venue. I was on the medical school interview events committee and became events chair in Med 2. And for that, it was for the medical school applicants to McGill. We usually organize the weekend before, like dinners, sports games, campus tours. So I joined that team just to kind of organize events for the incoming applicants. So those are just stuff that I enjoy doing. I didn't do it with dermatology in mind, but I would really recommend just joining clubs that you kind of are passionate about and that you can grow within them over the 4 years, and just, you know, start as just an executive, like a committee member, and then move on to more executive levels like chair or president. So that would be for my extracurriculars. And then basically when I got into research would be the summer between Med 2 and Med 3. That's kind of the longest summer that we have before we get into all of our rotations and electives. So that summer I did a research elective and I worked with a dermatology PI. So just as a parenthesis, I wasn't 100% sure that I was going to do dermatology at that point, but I figured that that is the most competitive thing that I was interested in at the time. So I thought that was a good time to start getting involved in research, because even if I had decided, you know, in Med 4 to not apply, I could have used those publications and that research experience towards an application to any other specialty. So it's always good to get involved as soon as you think you want something competitive. And then finally in Med 3 and Med 4, I was focusing on research, trying to go to conferences, trying to present my work, and obviously my elective performance, which I can talk more about later.
You brought some really great points, and we'll go in details about the research, away rotations. But I like the idea that you had so much extracurricular activities, and these are really good because so many applicants think that scores is the most important things, research, and these are good to have on your CV. But these activities that you had, it shows a different aspect of you, that you can be a successful member of a team, that you can be a leader. You learn actually a lot from these activities.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And I think for sure, like obviously your priorities have to be different if your grades are going to count. And I know you have the USMLEs. I actually took the USMLE Step 1, and that is a very hard exam. Like I can't believe you guys all have to do it, and you have to do so well for these competitive specialties. So I really respect the fact that that is so important. But I think finding like 1 or 2 extracurriculars, even if it's not a club, even if it's just something that you do in your spare time, like sports or photography or anything, I think it can make you stand out as an individual and gives you more things to talk about yourself when you're at the interview. That doesn't sound like the same thing everyone else is going to say, which is everyone's going to talk about their electives and their research. So you want to find other things that show who you are, and that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, as you said, it makes you stand out, especially with the large number of applicants. You need something unique to show about yourself to make you stand out. And you don't have to fake it. You just find your passion in no matter what it was, do it well, and that will make you a unique applicant.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that scores are only pass fail in the Canadian schools. Is there any additional exam like the USMLE Step 1, Step 2 CK that is scored, and the higher you score, the more competitive you are, or it's all pass fail?
So for getting into a residency program, it's really all pass fail, and it's really your elective evaluation. So these are the comments that your supervisors will write in your evaluation that are read by the program directors as they select who they're going to take to the interview. So those are important, but no numerical values. What we do have is we have a board exam that we have to take when we graduate medical school, and it's called the LMCC or the MCCQE Part 1. We have Part 2, and it goes on. Those are all done in residency. So just the Part 1 would be done basically the summer that you're graduating. And again, this is happening after you've applied and you've probably matched to a program. So this grade does not matter. It matters, you have to pass the exam, but it doesn't impact where you get matched to.
Awesome. So I want to go into now the electives. In the US, fourth-year medical students do away rotations or electives at their institutions or other institutions in the specialty that they're interested in. It's like 4-week rotation in that specific specialty, and they get experience in the specialty and letters of recommendation from people well known in the field. How does it work in Canada regarding away rotations or electives?
So yeah, it's again very similar. Again, this year has been completely changed because of COVID. Typically, we go away usually for we don't have a limit on how long, how many away rotations that we can do, but we usually have about 20 weeks of rotations that we can do as electives, and they can be at your home school or anywhere that you want. So for people who were at McGill, for example, and wanted to match back in Ontario to a different province, they would spend almost all 20 of those weeks in Ontario. So you can do them wherever you want. This year, everything is done at the home schools, so that's a little bit different, but hopefully for people applying in the following years, it'll go back to normal. And so yeah, for us, we also have something called the electives cap. This is new. It actually wasn't implemented in my year, but in the current year and the years to come, that'll be the case. So to the best of my knowledge, it means that you can do a maximum of 8 weeks in one specialty, like any specialty basically. So for example, someone like me who wanted dermatology, I would have to choose a maximum of 8 weeks to do in dermatology, and the remaining weeks would have to be done in a different specialty. So that was basically put into place to kind of limit the amount of people that just do all of their weeks in one specialty, and kind of broaden the range of experiences that applicants have, so that they are still coming out of med school well-rounded, even though they demonstrated their interest and got a lot of experience during those 8 weeks. So that's something new in the Canadian system that I'm not sure is present in the US. So it kind of makes it a little bit more difficult, but also kind of make sure that everyone is on the same kind of level, and everyone has, usually if you're applying to something competitive, everyone will have 8 weeks in that specialty, and then you have room to play around with specialties that you're also interested in, or things that you'll think are related to that field that will help you later on.
Yeah, definitely. Away rotations here are very important. We don't have a cap. So generally students do between 2 to 4. The more competitive the specialty is, the higher the number of away rotations students usually do. So generally 2 to 4. With COVID, again, things were different. So some programs started something called the virtual away rotations, and we wrote a paper about that. Some programs accepted those who don't have a home program. So let's say I'm in medical school that does not have a plastic surgery program. So other programs were welcoming these students to get them exposure to the field, mentors, and letters of recommendation. But if you have a home program at your medical school, they were not allowed to go to do away rotations in that specialty outside their school.
Okay, interesting. I don't know if we have something like that, but there's a couple schools that definitely don't have every single specialty within their program. So I'm sure there's been something in place for them as well.
Awesome. Do you have any special evaluation? Is it just comments that you get after your electives, or do you have a score, a grade, or letters of recommendation? What is the main value of doing an away rotation?
So again, yeah, it's just a written evaluation. It's usually on a standardized form, but there's no written score, numerical score that you get for evals. It's just a pass-fail again, but you usually get kind of like a paragraph of comments. It's usually structured in a way where you have part A, where it's kind of your positive comments, part B will be something to work on, and then part C will be kind of a summative summary of your performance during that rotation. And as you mentioned, letters of reference are super important as well. Usually in the Canadian system, schools will ask for around 3 letters of reference when you apply to a program, but some of them will ask for 2. I think the maximum I've ever seen is 5, but usually it's good to have like 3 solid like letters of reference from staff in the specialty that you're applying to. And then in general, I think a good tip to make sure you never are at a lack of reference letters is to ask for them even in specialties that you're not going to apply to. Just if you ever have a good rapport with the staff and you feel like they can vouch for your communication and your teamwork and your knowledge and your patient care, whatever it is, even if it's someone you've only done research with but never worked with clinically, it's always so good to just get as many letters of references as you can. That way you are always kind of free to select whichever ones you think would be good for whichever school or program you're applying to. So that's something I learned along the way.
That's awesome. And generally when people do away rotations, is it just to have a better chance at matching in the specialty in general, or you usually do it at the institution you're interested in to match at that specific institution?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think for sure having more, like anytime you do more electives in the specialty you're interested is helpful to match in general, but usually people will go specifically to schools that they want to rank higher, like so that they build rapport with the residents and with the staff so they can get a letter of reference. A letter of reference from a school that you want to apply to is probably kind of the best way to make sure that you're known by them and to make sure you have a good rapport, that they get to know you better. So I think those would be the main reasons to go. And also, if you're not sure and you haven't been to all these cities, it's a good way to get to know the city, kind of see what it would be like to live there, see if that's a place that you would consider ranking at all, or if you would really not like to live there, for example. So it's a good way to see if you would match the city as well.
Yeah, definitely. We always think that will the program like us? Will we be a good fit in this program? But you have also to think about yourself. If you want to live there for the next 3, 4, 5 years in that city with these people, do you fit with their personality? Because I believe different programs have different personalities and different people can fit in different programs. It's not like everyone can fit everywhere and every program can welcome anyone.
Absolutely. And it's great to frame it that way too, because it can get really, really like anxiety inducing when you're just thinking like, oh, I have to fit in everywhere I go. I want to fit in. I want people to like me. But if you think about it also, like, I want to like them. I want to feel like I fit in with them. I want to feel like this fits with my lifestyle. Then you kind of, it puts it in perspective.
That's an awesome discussion about the aware rotations. And now I want to move on to research. Can you tell me a little bit about you? You mentioned a little bit about your research experience, what you did, but I want to dive more in details. What are the expectations from somebody who's matching into competitive specialties regarding research, publication, conferences? How did you approach your mentors? What kind of studies did you work on, or students generally work on?
So research is definitely important for any competitive specialty, I think, as it is in the States. It depends for sure. If you can have as many publications and presentations as you can, that would be ideal. But I don't think that you need to have, a certain number of published studies or certain number of presentations to get into a program. I think the large goal is to see, like, can you do research? Can you work as part of the research team? Can you respect deadlines? Can you write a good paper? Are you able to work independently, or do you need us to spoon feed you all of the instructions and guide you through, or can you produce something that makes sense without, our direct guidance? So I think it's a way for programs to kind of see how you work and if you are able to produce something that is sound without having to have been handheld through the entire process. And I think those are traits that will make you more attractive to them. For research, just to tell you, I guess, what I did is in my second year of medical school, towards the end, that's when I decided I was really interested in derm. I sent an email to like 10 dermatology staff at McGill. It was pretty much the same email. I kind of like looked at what their research interests were and like tailored each email to that. And I asked if they had any projects that they needed any help with, or if they were interested in having a medical student on a project. And I think only one person responded, and it was the person that I ended up working with for the rest of my medical school and even currently. So I'm always forever grateful for them for responding to me and having me on. And I ended up doing research with them during the summer between Med 2 and Med 3, and then I really just continued doing projects. So that was an epidemiology project. So it was really nice in that I could do it from home. So I didn't have to like go in every day to a wet lab. And even though I initially had wanted to get involved in a clinical project, it was a little bit more doable for me at that stage because my schedule was so busy with rotations that it was nice to do something that was mostly analysis to be done from home. So like epi projects or, systematic reviews are always easier to work from afar, especially in the context of a pandemic. But if you ever have the opportunity to do clinical research, I think it's so cool because you get to work directly in the hospital and see patients, maybe observe surgeries, depending on what you're doing research in. And then for presentations, it's always good once you have something to present, once you're involved in a project, to write up a quick abstract and submit it to as many conferences as you can. I actually only presented at one conference, even though I applied to a couple. So it doesn't mean you need to present at all the major conferences. Like for dermatology, there's the American Academy of Dermatology. For Canada, there's the Canadian Dermatology Association. Those are like the big names. I went to the conferences, but I never presented at them. And at the time, I felt like I had kind of failed. But I ended up presenting to a smaller conference. And I think that's all you need, just to show that you're going out there to get those experiences and show that you're capable of putting a project together and presenting it.
You brought some great points, and I want to comment on some of these. So for the research, you're 100% correct. Research is not only for you to have publications, it reflects so much on your personality. Are you somebody who would finish their work, easy to work with, and sometimes you can get letters of recommendation from your research mentors. So it can go way more than the publications and presentations. And I made a video, and I'll leave the link in the description below, on what is the value of research. It goes, again, way beyond having few papers here and there. The other
Mhm.
thing is, during research, you get research experience. And this is really good for especially academic centers, competitive specialties, because they want people who will not only be taking good care of patients, but also advancing the field, doing some studies that can improve our understanding of disease process, how we can manage patients. So it's good to have people with a little bit of research experience. Of course, clinical research is can be randomized trials, retrospective studies. You can do systematic reviews or the basic science where you have to go to a lab, work with mice. Uh, Definitely, basic science takes more time, more dedication. You need to have your schedule fit the time of experiment. Sometimes you have to be on certain time at certain points for a point of the experiment. And if you're in school or in surgery, that doesn't work. So it's always easier to do something clinical as a medical student. Most of the people I work with, they help with data collection, so they can get access to the medical records, and they can do that from home. You can also work as, like I mentioned, on systematic reviews, review articles, case reports. The
Mhm.
more you work on, the more experience you get, and the more connections you build with people. So presentations are, again, very important, not for the value of presentation itself, but when you go to a meeting, you meet people. You might be meeting a program director. You can tell them about your research, and you might get an interview from that. So that's the value of presentations beyond having an extra line on your CV.
Absolutely. I think the point about the presentations, I remember being really disappointed that I didn't get accepted to present at the American Academy of Dermatology, actually, but I ended up going, and it's such a great network opportunity. I met so many residents and staff that I would never have met outside of that context. So it's always a good idea to like invest the time and the the money as well on the airplane tickets and the hotels, but it's such a worthy investment to go to these conferences.
Exactly. It's always better to have something presented, but I myself went to a meeting and I didn't have anything to present. It's kind of cool for some time to not have to worry about presentations and just connect with people. So
Yeah.
even if you don't have something to present and you know that there would be good number of people that can help you in your residency application, I would recommend going. It's fine to pay a little bit of money for the registration, the ticket, but it's worth it.
Absolutely.
So we talked about the research experience, the electives, what can you do during your medical school? What else do you need when you apply for residency? Do you need a personal statement? You touched a little bit on the letters of recommendation, but we can dive in more details about that.
Sounds good. So I'll start with the letters of recommendation just because we quickly kind of touched on it. As I said, it's good to get as many as you can from the electives that you do, or as we mentioned earlier, from people that you've done research with. I myself got a letter of recommendation from the staff that I had done a bunch of research with. Clinically, I think I worked with him for one afternoon. So, he was able to comment on my clinical skills, but mostly he was commenting on my research and how I worked with the teams that he worked with. In addition, like I said, it's always great to have a couple letters kind of to use from other specialties that can corroborate your strengths in a different way, kind of like not tailored necessarily to the program that you're applying to, but just kind of in a more vast sense, or if you did something interesting with them as well.
So
Um,
when you applied to dermatology, did you use letters of recommendation from other specialties?
So I mostly use just letters of recommendation from dermatologists, but there's, like I mentioned, there's some programs that require like 5 letters. So in those cases, I didn't have 5 letters from dermatology programs, so I supplemented with 1 or 2 letters from, I think, pediatrics and family medicine, I believe. Um, so that's what I did. Another thing, just to touch on briefly, it's okay if you don't get a letter of recommendation from every rotation that you go to in that program and that specialty. I mean, so for example, one of my electives in dermatology, I actually came out of it without a letter and it was actually my home program. It was one of the rotations that I did at one of the hospitals at McGill, and the supervisor that I worked with didn't feel like they could write me a strong letter. And I was really, really disappointed when that happened. But just to say that it's not the end of the world, as long as you're doing well overall and you have some letters from your other electives, it won't kind of make or break you. You can survive. And I actually got into that school, which is my home school. So I just wanted to fit that in, because sometimes things can get really overwhelming and things can really get to you. So it's important to keep a broad perspective and not let these little one thing that doesn't go your way kind of drag you down. And letters of reference are stressful to get. So it can be a stressful situation to encounter. And then for personal statements, this kind of fits in with what I had said earlier about trying to kind of hone in on your extracurriculars and just things that make you a little bit stand out. So the strategy I took for my letters was to start with a paragraph that was kind of not at all about medicine. So I really recommend just choosing kind of one of your hobbies, like something that you really enjoy that makes you stand out. And if you can find a way to tie that into the specialty that you are interested in, I think that's a great way to segue into kind of talking about what draws you to the specialty and what would make you a good applicant. So I like to start mine with kind of like a story, just a couple of lines, and just kind of like draw the reader in. And then I would launch into why I really like dermatology, what would make me a good dermatologist, what are my career goals if I get accepted into your residency program, and etc. But I think having an interesting paragraph that's unique from anyone else's will help you stand out.
Yes, I agree with that. And we've made several videos on how to prepare for a personal statement, and I'll leave the link in the description below. But you have to make it personal. That's why it's called personal statement. So don't try to copy from somebody else. Try to show your strength in a unique way that makes it easy to read and stand out. So now I want to move on to the interviews. After you submit your application, you get your interviews. Can you give us a little bit idea of how the interview process works and some tips on how to optimize your chances of acing the interview?
Absolutely. So for the interviews, you usually hear back kind of towards the end of December to the beginning of January, and your interviews are conducted in the second half of January towards the beginning of February. And classically, we have usually either interviews in a panel. So you'll have like kind of like 10 people sitting in the room, all the people on the committee. You walk in and they ask you questions for like 20 minutes. Other than that, we'll have something called the MMI. And that's just kind of like multiple mini interviews. So you walk into different rooms, and each room has like 2 or 3 people that ask you questions. Often there'll be questions like how you deal with certain situations. So that can be another kind of format. I think this year is going to be a bit different because of COVID. So I'm not too sure how that will impact the interviews, but I think it'll probably be something similar to those 2 formats. So I can talk a little bit about kind of what questions are classically seen in the interviews. I'm sure it's the same in the US as it is in Canada, but these are just some things to keep in mind. Obviously, you don't want to sound rehearsed when you're at your interview, but for example, one of my weaknesses is public speaking. I get so nervous. So for me, it was really beneficial during the month before my interviews, I had a little journal and I was writing just like things that would pop into my mind about my strengths, my weaknesses, why I want dermatology, just scenarios that would pop into my mind of like a difficult patient situation that I handled well, or a difficult team that I worked with during one of my rotations. So just like little stories to tell about yourself that you might not think of on the spot if you haven't taken some notes on it prior. So just some things that I would think of would be, telling the team that's interviewing you about yourself, like, about your background, not necessarily academic, but again, just kind of like trying to make yourself stand out, the things that you like, the things that are important to you. Obviously, being comfortable discussing your strengths and weaknesses is always something that's super important. You want to be able to answer the question of why this specialty. Another thing that I think is interesting is being able to say something positive and something negative about the specialty. And that's something that might be hard for you because you might not have the most experience working in that specialty after 8 to 16 weeks, but it's something to ask residents what they think would be kind of a negative thing about the specialty so that you have something to comment on. And obviously you want to know kind of like why you like that program, whether it be the program, the city, the team that you had the opportunity to work with, if it's not your home school, wanting to be able to discuss kind of what your career interests are. It doesn't mean it has to be set in stone, but just being able to say like, I'm interested in doing research, or I'm interested more in teaching. These are kind of fellowships that I'd be interested in, even if it's not set in stone. And then finally, I would say that in the Canadian system, we tend to have like some random questions that pop up, like things that have nothing to do with medicine or the specialty. So stuff like describe yourself in one word, or teach me something in under 1 minute, or these are theoretical things that I had practiced for. But one of the ones that I actually got was, what would be the book title of your autobiography? Like, can't prepare for this kind of thing. And I think I turned super red and just laughed and like blurted out something that was very silly. And I'm not really sure what it was. Even like, I think I blacked that out. But just to be prepared for these kind of like weird questions that might pop up. And it's okay if you don't have the smartest, most eloquent answer. It's more to see like kind of like how you handle stress, and if you're going to get kind of like mean, or if you're just going to take it in stride and like be able to laugh at yourself. At least that's what I think they're for.
That's awesome. And I also prepared several videos on how to prepare for residency interviews, common questions you might encounter. And again, I'll leave the links in the description below. Now, after you interviewed, do you expect the matching results at a certain time, or can you take us through how the process works afterward? Are you allowed to, for example, to send emails to the program after you interview to tell them that you're my #1 choice?
So basically, yeah, after you finish your interviews, you wait about 3 to 4 weeks, and your match day is usually on like the 1st of March or something around that time. It's usually at noon. But because it's all over the country, it might not be noon for every province. I think it's like noon Eastern. And in terms of emailing programs, you're definitely allowed to email them and say like, thank you so much for like having me for the interview. Like, you're allowed to express your interest. I actually don't know if you're allowed to say like, this is the program that I'm ranking first. I think that I don't know the rules, but I don't think it's necessarily looked well upon. I think it's probably better to keep it more general. I think as well, the programs aren't technically supposed to tell you that you're their #1. I think because in the past, I've heard stories that a program has like told someone that they were going to be ranked first, and then they didn't get ranked first at this program. So I think they try to keep it more like, you can send a thank you letter and appreciate their time, but no, not really doing things behind the scenes. And yeah, basically over that month, it's a very stressful month, but it's also a time to just kind of forget all about everything. Usually we don't have rotations during that month, so it's a little bit easier. We just have like classes. So you're with all your friends in the auditorium, and you can kind of spend your time doing other things until you wait for match day. Yeah, that's basically it.
Any other aspect that can make you a competitive applicant other than the grades we talked about, or the pass fail, the exams you do, research, extracurricular activities, away rotations, personal statement? Is there anything else in the recipe of matching into competitive specialties?
I think it's such a hard question to answer because everyone has their different strengths and everyone feels like they match for different reasons. I can tell you that personally, what I think is that I think, especially for competitive programs, they're usually smaller programs, which means they're very tight knit. So you want to really make sure that you feel like you're a fit for them, and that they feel that you're a fit for their program and for their residents and staff. So one of the biggest things that I felt helped me match to my preferred program, which was McGill at my home school, was that I felt that I had such a good relationship with all of the residents. I felt, first of all, that they were so welcoming, but I also felt that over the weeks that I was able to spend with them, I was able to feel comfortable around them. We would joke around. We would talk about, our favorite restaurants or exercise classes, like things that had nothing to do with medicine necessarily, but I felt like there was a good vibe between us. And just in general, I was always eager to learn. I think taking criticism well is something that's really important, because you will definitely be, told to redo something, or told that you didn't, have such a great differential. At some point, these things are going to happen, and it's good to be able to take things in stride and not let it make you combative or angry, and just appreciate the fact that someone's pointing something out to you and learn from it. Being a good team player and not being someone who's going to steal patience and just kind of like bring negative energy to the team, and rather just try to help everyone out. Helping out the senior residents when they're on call is also something that I would do, and I would stay late to help do any consults that we would have after clinics. I think that's something universal, especially in surgical specialties. It's good to do to help people that when they're on call. So I think just being a team player is the thing that will set most people apart and make sure that they want to spend 5 years of their life with you and pick you.
That's awesome. And this is something that is hard to evaluate. When you have an exam, you get a score, and you can compare scores between students. You can compare number of publications, number of away rotations. It's hard to compare personalities. And I think personality is one of the most important things when choosing residents, because you want to pick somebody who's smart, but also fun to be around. You get along with people, and you would be happy to spend the next 3 or 4 or 6, 7 years with them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's hard because when you're on electives, like you're so stressed, you're in the middle of doing all this research, all this other stuff, like you're not sleeping a lot. So it's hard. You think like, how am I going to put my best foot forward every single day? And there are some days that are going to be off days and you have to like accept that and roll with it. But I think if you can just try to have fun with the team, it'll be genuine and they'll see that. And I think that's the biggest thing that you can do to make a good impression once you have all that other, more concrete stuff backing you up.
Definitely. As you know, some specialties are extremely competitive. The number of spots is small and there are a lot of applicants. So some applicants consider dual applying. So they apply to, for example, plastic surgery and general surgery. They apply to dermatology and internal medicine. What's your experience on that and any recommendations regarding dual applying?
So absolutely, that's something that is very common in Canada too. And I personally applied, I did backup, I applied to dermatology and family medicine. I think it's important to really choose something that you'd be happy to do. You want to make sure that if you do match to your backup, like that you will feel fulfilled, even though if you'll be disappointed, that's expected. The other thing that I would say is to plan your electives kind of accordingly. If you are going to back up and you do all your weeks in like a competitive surgical specialty and you're backing up with family medicine, you want to find at least like, I had 2 weeks that I did in family medicine. So all my electives were very derm oriented, but I did a 2-week elective in family medicine and I got a letter from them. And I think that was super important in me getting my interviews in family medicine as well, because they could see that there was a genuine interest, even though they could also tell for sure that I was applying to dermatology. So I think it's important to make a little bit of time in your schedule for that second specialty that you're applying to. And for the Canadian system, I think that'll be facilitated by the electives cap that's been implemented, because it forces you to do those weeks in something different. So like personally, what I did is that I applied to family medicine just because I wasn't ready to leave kind of where I live to go too far across Canada, because we have dermatology programs all across the country and I wasn't comfortable leaving and going too far. So what I did is I applied to dermatology programs in Quebec and Ontario, so in a couple of schools, and I also applied to family medicine programs kind of closer to where I lived. And that's what I felt made me the most comfortable. And I didn't want to leave because I have so much that's tying me to Montreal. I have an amazing boyfriend. I have a big group of friends. My family is all living here or around here. So I didn't really want to go too far. And I think those are very legitimate reasons. And it's so important to be honest with yourself, because that rank list is final. And if you don't think that you're going to be happy at the opposite end of the country, then you shouldn't put it on your rank list, because you need to be 100% sure of everywhere that you list. So I think it's super, super important to just think about what your goals are in life and what's important to you and what makes you happy every day, and choose kind of where you're going to rank and what programs you're going to apply to according to that.
Now, this is a great point. I truly believe that at the end of the day, it's a life. So you have to choose the balance between what you want personally versus professionally, what your goals are, and make your residency decisions based on that. And another great point that you mentioned is the fact that you have to be passionate even about your second specialty or second option. When you go to interviews, when you do away rotations, invest the time, because people have invested time to interview you and do elective review. So just show passion about that, and that will help you if you did not have the chance to match in your first option.
Absolutely.
So that's going to wrap up our discussion for today's episode. Do you have any additional thoughts on the match process, for any advice for residency applicants?
I think I covered most of it, but I guess what I would say is that try again, like not to let it consume your whole life. It will be very stressful. Like it's definitely one of the most stressful things that most of us go through. But I would say try, especially before your interviews that month, I don't know if it's the same for you guys. Maybe you still have to do rotations, but as much as possible, try to kind of do the things that make you happy so that when you go into your interviews, you are feeling like your best possible self. I think that's like the thing that helped me the most to do well in my interviews, which is kind of like that last final step that you need to get kind of where you want to go. And I think doing things that are just positive, whether it's exercising, doing your favorite hobbies, taking your favorite classes, seeing friends and family. And I know that's going to be a lot harder because of the pandemic, but just taking kind of like investing a lot of time in yourself. That way that when you go into your interviews, like you're feeling so amazing that you feel like you can't mess it up, you know, and that's going to give you that positive energy that you need. And I think overall, just try to remember that, you know, try to be happy with all scenarios, you know, like obviously it's really stressful to think that you won't get matched, or you'll get kind of your last thing on your rank list, or if you're applying to two specialties that you're not going to get your dream specialty, you're going to get your second choice. Those are all things that, especially for a group of people that are very type A and very perfectionist and obviously have achieved a lot in their lives, is a really hard pill to swallow. But just remember, there's so much more to life than those things, and that whatever you match to and however it goes, it's probably for a reason, even if you don't see it right in that moment. So just to kind of find your peace and your zen with the whole process and know that it doesn't define you as a person at all, would be my advice.
That was a great, insightful episode. Thank you so much, Leila, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
For our viewers, if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Malki Asad. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in future videos.